Hello, my name's Aidan Necton and this is my final presentation for my 2020 project for the theme Back to the Future. So with the contents of what we were asked to create a media project that fit the theme of the event that we were doing this year was Back to the Future. So overall I had decided to create a scene from an anime that was set in the 1900s and turn it into a more modern look overall. So and the anime I chose was Demon Slayer because it was set in the 1900s and it had quite a bit of, it had an anime over it, it had a decent scene that I could do for it, and it also had a real life version of the trailer as well that I could use to help me model it with referencing. So yeah, so here was a mood board I created to, show off, because you have here in the middle, you have the actual train that they've actually made to show a more modern version of what that train up there that actually is the train from the anime / game they did for it. I use these ones to get a bit more of a side view of what it looks like and a more technical drawing that give me more detail on how it looks, so I can give it a bit more detail if I had time to do it. So when we start the project, we need to do planning and production. So what I had to do for this project was make a design brief to show what the purpose, target audience, what I wanted to accomplish before I finished this project, the style of it. So I wanted to make it more realistic because I needed to make it more modern, not animate like the movie. Final deliverable, what it was going to be. So it was going to be a short animation of the scene, showing it off at different angles, and then finally doing an overhead, just to show off the whole model together. So the essential features I needed was pretty much I needed the environment to a decent standard, and the train to not too detailed, but detailed so you know it's actually the train that I'm making. Desirable features would be, I would have added a bit more into the background, maybe add a few buildings, quite a bit of bushes and stuff, and the train I would have probably added a lot more detail if I had time. Same with the platform, I probably have added a bit more, bits to it. So when we started the project, we needed to make a block out so we could plan where things would go and how it would fit into the scene through how it would scale properly to an actual person in the scene. So that's what it actually looked like to start with. Nothing special, just a few boxes and stuff to give it that. So also we had to make 2 other presentations except for this one. We had to make the first presentation that we made was to present our ideas. So when I was doing mine, I presented my ideas. Most of my ideas I presented for my first one were more arc-viz, but in the end I didn't really stick to any of them because they just didn't go well, and I didn't really fancy them, to be honest. They were too much work for how little time we had. So that's why I stuck with this idea that I chose. Because in my second one I talked about the new idea, and also I showed off how far I'd done, so how much modelling and how much write-up I'd done since the first presentation we did. And then this one that we're doing now is just to show off the rest, to show off the finished model, the animation, and to evaluate how well I've done so far. So research. So I have had a bit of research. This is just some key points that I've just found. A lot more research I've done is I went into more detail about the train. So when it was made, when it was first produced, what time, time. So I think it was between 1912 to 1914 that this train was made and used. Like I said here, this is a newspaper, or if you say an online newspaper title, where that this Railway Station Museum has given people from the animated Demon Slayer community, fans, chance to ride the actual train from the movie. So that's the one I was modelling. Also, that image you saw, if I go back a slide, you see this one here. This is a prototype version of my train before they built it. So looking between that and the actual image of the photo, there are quite a lot of differences, but quite a few similarities as well between the prototype and the actual main model. Also for research, I went away and did my own research because originally to make it easier, they actually made a game based on my anime and the scene that I was doing in the game they had. So I went away, I used the scene, I went around taking pictures to help me model the environment because the environment, I could not find a lot of things on the environment that looked correct, so I went into the game and used that environment to my best and remodeled it better. And like I said, they made a game called Demon Slayer: The Chronicles, and it was released last year in October. Great game. So practical skills wise, so I used 3 different software. I used 3ds Max for the modelling side, Substance and Photoshop for the texturing. Mainly Substance for texturing. I used Photoshop mainly for the image textures, for where I was trying to create an image for certain things, for just a little plate I made. So Substance I made more of like all the train to make them look more realistic, so I had to use Substance to make it actually look nice. 3ds Max, yeah, I have used to make my model, my block out, and my environment. Modifiers I used the bend tool for most of the pipe work for the detail. Symmetry, just to save time modelling, instead of having to model the whole bit, I would, delete half of it and symmetry it so it would look good. Editable poly I use a lot just to move stuff around and actually make it look right, and then Open Subdivide to make it look smooth and realistic. So we've got different stages of modelling. We've got first stage, second stage, third stage, and then final stage. That's without textures. And then I added that in as a little bit of scenery inside the train station because it was Demon Slayer, so I added a little bit from the anime in. So we had when we had the first model, all I modelled was just the base look of it. So the body, not too much detail, the wheels. But then when I moved on to the second phase, I had added more detail, so I made sure the wheels weren't, floating around. They were actually attached to the train, and I made them actually look like train wheels that would actually move. And then I added the back bit of the train, and then I moved on to that. Then I went on and added more detail to the train, because you can see between here you've got more detail with pipes, ladder, and you've actually got windows on the car. You've actually got proper windows now, and then you've got the bit to the front. And then here I finally added the back bit, so the carriages, the passenger carriages, and then did the environment. So yeah, all of that. Then I went away and I textured it in Substance, and this is what the final looked like. It turned out it's a lot better than I thought. Textures could have been a bit better, but I think it's where I put it into Substance and into 3ds Max, where it's texturing they don't really go well. I think it would have been better if I textured it and blended for next time. So now we will look at let's see how I'm going to have to already did this ahead of time. Here we go.
If there's sound, you're going to have to plug the speakers in.
There's no sound, no sound really needed, to be honest. It's just so. So, during modelling / texturing phase, we did come across quite a few problems. So first problem we came against was trying to texture. So when we put it into substance, we'd UV unwrap it sometimes, and when UV unwrapping, it would turn out, it wouldn't UV unwrap properly, especially when the model needed 3 different textures. So I had to go into 3ds Max and select each poly and change a different colour so that it would make its own UV map. Because it was just like certain bits, like if this bit down here, this little house, because you have the wooden texture all the way around, but then you have the glass windows that I needed to be, black glass. So I had to colour in, the windows in a different colour in 3ds Max, so it would create its own UV map. So when it went into Substance, instead of having one layer with every texture on one, you have 2 separate layers where I could just do the windows one texture and the body the other. Second was when applying it. I had to do the exact same thing. When applying it, I would apply the texture to the body and it would just apply it to the whole model, especially if I had 2 textures. So, yet again, I had to go in and select the polys and apply that texture to that certain amount of polys. So when looking at the third problem was, as you can see here, you have this, you have this where you can see through. If you actually looked under the model, it was open, everything. You could see all of the inner workings of everything. So in the end, I had to create, this is actually same here, so I had to create this so it would push up into there and, make sure it actually not look see-through and it, things could slot in there without having to see through to the other side. So yeah. Extra part of the wheels. So with the wheels, it had 2 different parts. So the wheel, and then there was a tiny bit at the bottom. Originally, I tried to model it with the part in with the wheel, so all one object. But when doing that, the open subdivide would just go crazy and make the wheel just not look like a wheel anymore. It looked very spiky and it just didn't turn out well. So instead, I put a box down there and just, turned it into an edible poly and moved it around just so it looked like it curved down the bottom and straight at the top, so it looked like it fit in the wheel just right. And then finally, what that is, when I did the final render, as you see at the end, it was all rotating. Originally, when I tried to all rotate it, it would all rotate around their individual pivot points. So what I had to do is I had to create a dummy and link all the models to the dummy and then link the dummy to the ground so it would all spin together instead of all just spinning around their own pivot points. So yeah. So overall, I think it went well, but there could have been some improvements. Like I said with the texturing, I think next time I should have really textured in Blender because it just didn't. When I transferred them over from Substance they looked so much nicer, but then when they went into 3ds Max, they just went a little bit, just dulled down a bit and didn't look as detailed as it was in Substance. I would have liked to add a bit more environment, just to give it a bit more life. Maybe add some buildings or maybe some bushes, just to give it a bit more, instead of just looking like an empty plain, and just a train scene. My time management could have been a tad better because, because I was a little bit behind on my write-up, but luckily I got that all sorted out and I'm all fine now. The things I was really impressed with how my train model turned out, because it turned out a lot better than, because at the start I was looking at it and I was just like, no, this is not going to turn out great. Even at the end, it turned out a lot better than I thought. The animation was a lot better because, learning how to do the cameras properly now, because, they were very finicky, but I'm glad I got them done. And the platform model was good, but I think some of the proportions could have been a tad better. Yeah, that's it.